Chapter 1470. System. Dear host, this is interesting. Tanghua, that's right. Now that the three of them are living together, let's see how they fight. Are you happy? Happy to death. System. He was also happy to death. With the three of them together, who knew what would happen? With the scheming of the three of them, it was possible that they would be evenly matched. Tangxi was a princess and had a noble status. She liked Lu Qing. Lu Qing actually looked down on Tangxi in his heart. He had always been thinking of his great host. As for Wanzhu, although her status was low, she was someone by his dear host's side and also liked Lu Qing. Lu Qing would definitely treat Wanzhu differently. So, in the end, Wanzhu would still listen to Lu Qing. Guo, this matter is settled just like that? Tangxi was not afraid that the emperor would not agree. On the contrary, this matter was resolved in the most perfect way. In order to protect the princess's reputation, the new top scholar would lose his life. It would not sound good if word got out. In order to protect the new top scholar, the princess would be sacrificed for the rest of her life. It would be even worse. With the two of them together, everyone would be happy and praised. His imperial father would definitely not object. What he asked was that this matter could be secretly planned by Lu Qing. Although there was no evidence, this matter was really too suspicious. Isn't this good? Tanghua pursed her lips and smiled. Imperial brother, don't think too much. I see that second imperial sister is very fond of Lu Zhuang. This can be considered as helping the two lovers. When Lu Qing and Tangxi heard Tanghua's words, one was upset while the other was very happy. Fortunately, Guo did not fall into the water. Who knows what to do? Tangxi said happily, in the future, when you go out to play, you must follow closely. Guo is really too daring. Even if our Baixia country is prosperous and the people are peaceful, it is inevitable that there will be some small accidents. I know. Brother, don't worry. In fact, Lu Zhuangyuan should be glad that I wasn't the one who fell into the water. If it was me, he might have died. Tangxi caught a glimpse of Lu Qing's pale face from the corner of her eyes. She found it funny and hurriedly said, "All right, let's go back to the palace. We still have to explain things to Imperial Father after such a big incident." He turned around and said to Tangxi and Lu Qing, "You two come too?" As for Wanzhu, who was standing at the side, he was just an insignificant person. As the crown prince, he naturally wouldn't care about him. Anyway, this palace maid could not return to his sister's side to serve her. In the end, Lu Qing became the son-in-law of the second princess, Tangxi. Wanzhu went to Tangxi's side. The matter had already been settled, and it was not something a little palace maid like her could change. She couldn't stay by the eldest princess's side. She didn't want to marry casually, and she didn't want to be alone for the rest of her life. Only by going to Tangxi's side could she get close to Lu Qing. None of this was something she could have predicted. Who knew that so many things would happen? Unfortunately, it was too late to regret. Go to the second princess's side. Serve her carefully. Ingzhu handed Wanzhu a bag and some money. Got it. Wanzhu secretly glanced at Tanghua. Finally, he bowed and left. She still had some complaints in her heart. She had served His Highness for so many years, but he didn't even ask her to stay. Tangxi's princess residence had been built long ago. Under the emperor's decree, she and Lu Qing were married and moved into the princess residence. Tangxi was quite happy. Lu Qing was a little disappointed, but in the end, he couldn't do anything. He was still unwilling to accept it. The Peak. Chapter 1471. Lu Qing thought of another serious problem. The fact that he had a wife and a son could not be exposed. Therefore, after a while, Lu Qing arranged for his confidant to keep an eye on his first wife, Lin Yuexiang. At this time, his son was only 2 or 3 years old. Lin Yuexiang should not be able to leave, so she would not bring a child who had difficulty moving into the imperial city to look for him. Therefore, he was more at ease. After becoming the prince consort, he did not want to be idle all day. With the help of Tangxi's love, he did a lot of things. Both Tanghua and Tangxi had seen all of this in their eyes. Tangxi found that his good sister was really not simple. Most of the time, he would come to a sudden realization by making suggestions. Take Lu Qing, for example. On the surface, he seemed to be a good person. After becoming the prince consort, Except for staying by Tang Xi's side, he did not even care about Wan Zhu. He seemed to be a perfect man who was very righteous and did not like women. But secretly, Lu Qing did a lot of things. With the help of Princess Tang Xi's power, he did a lot of things that were beneficial to himself. Although these matters were insignificant in his opinion, he still had a better understanding of Lu Qing's character. What he cared about most was that Lu Qing got together with the third prince Tang Zhao through Tang Xi. Recently, their relationship had been getting better. Originally, he was only concerned about Tang Zhao, but when it came to Lu Qing, he thought that even if this third brother looked harmless, who knew what Xian was thinking, so he still had to be careful. Tangji likes to discuss with Tanghua whenever he has any problems. The system was at the side, watching its host cultivate the cattle that plowed the fields of the kingdom of northern Xia. Tangji was getting more and more mature, and his suggestions were getting more and more perfect. Tanghua was very satisfied. The emperor was also very satisfied. He thought that the crown prince, whom he had cultivated personally, was really his best successor, so he thought highly of him. At this time, Tangji kept a low profile. His original sharp edge was gradually withdrawn, and he seemed to become ordinary again. Who was the emperor? Sitting at the highest point, the person who could see the farthest was very satisfied with Tangji's way of doing things. He was neither arrogant nor rash. This was the crown prince of the northern summer country, someone who could shoulder great responsibilities. Tanghua had not left the palace for several months, which made Yun Buxiu very anxious. The first princess still has no intention of leaving the palace? No, young master. The follower felt helpless. His young master would ask this question 10 times a day. Her Highness the first princess was living comfortably in the palace. Why would she come out so casually? If there was another prince consort Lu, that would be a joke. Yun Buxiu couldn't help but recall that a few months ago, Tanghua quickly pulled her personal maid and kicked Wan Zhu into the lake. Originally, he had intended to help, but he did not expect her to react so quickly. He just didn't understand why she kicked her personal palace maid into the lake. But he believed that she had her own reasons for doing so. He thought that there would be many opportunities to meet in the future, and he would definitely perform well. He did not expect that she would not leave the palace at all. He wanted to directly climb into the palace, but after thinking about it, he decided not to. Last time, she had a very bad impression of him. If he did something like this again, she would not be willing to see him again. Young master, do you still want to take the precious herbs from the Empress of the Kingdom of Northern Summer? Although Mrs. Illness can be alleviated with other medicines, it is better to cure it as soon as possible. The Peak. Chapter 1472. There's just one more thing. The medicinal herb must be obtained, but we have to change the method. Yun Buxiu thought of the day when she left without hesitation and said, "Tomorrow, follow me to the palace to see the Emperor of Xia. After thinking about it, we should be able to obtain that medicinal herb with this method." The attendant was stunned. "What method, Gongzi? You said that if I work as the state preceptor and imperial physician of Xia for 20 years, the Empress should be willing to give that medicinal herb to me?" Yun Buxiu's tone was still a little uncertain. Her Royal Highness the eldest princess was so unusual. Although he had some fame, he might not be able to move the Emperor and Empress of Xia. The attendant was indeed surprised. "Gongzi, haven't you always liked to be idle and unwilling to be bound by power and the imperial court? In the past, Shiyun was willing to pay such a big price, but you were unwilling. It's different. Yunin, you don't understand." Yun Buxiu looked in the direction of the palace. "I feel vaguely uneasy. Although I don't know what's going on, if I don't go to see her, I may lose the treasure that will make me regret it for the rest of my life." Yun Yin was speechless. Even so, he didn't need to work as a laborer for Xia for 20 years and tie himself up in it. "Gongzi, if you do this, Miss must be very sad. She doesn't need you to lose your freedom for her." Yun Buxiu glanced at Yun Yin and said, "Who told you that this Gongzi became the state preceptor for my adopted sister? Not for Miss?" Yun Yin was surprised. Didn't Gongzi become the state preceptor for the sake of obtaining medicinal herbs? How can it not be for Miss? Of course not. This Gongzi just wants to use labor in exchange for rewards. I don't want to use such a despicable method to avoid making her unhappy. Her? Yun was stunned for a moment and said in disbelief, She? Is she the eldest princess? Yun, you're finally smart for once. Yun Bushio was very happy. Why don't we go and talk to the Emperor of Baixia now? He was a little annoyed. I wasted several months. I really shouldn't. After saying that, he strode out of the house and rushed to the palace. Cloud Hidden couldn't stop him, and in the end, could only chase after him. Yun Bushio's trip to the palace went very smoothly. All he had to do was reveal his name and show off his skills. The emperor was very happy. Yun Bushio, the arrogant and unruly expert who liked to be idle. It was said that the other party's divination skills were extremely profound. Furthermore, his medical skills were also very good. Such a talent only needed the title of state preceptor. Furthermore, it was for 20 years. He could not wait. Young Master Yun, since you're willing to be the imperial advisor of the Northern Xia Kingdom, I presume you have other requests. Yun Bushio didn't beat around the bush and directly said that she was here for a precious medicinal herb in the Empress' hands. Without another word, the Emperor invited the Empress over and asked her if she was willing to take out the medicinal herb in exchange for Yun Bushio to stay in Baixia as the state preceptor for 20 years. The Empress naturally agreed. She was also a smart person. A talent like Yun Bushio could only be found by chance. In her hands, the medicinal herb wouldn't be of much use. It was better to use it to recruit talents. Although Yun Bushio was a little arrogant and unruly, she was still very trustworthy. Tangji told Tanghua that Baixia was about to have an expert state preceptor and brought her over to see it. Tanghua walked into the palace and saw Yun Bushio, who was dressed in white and looked calm. His appearance was otherworldly, and he seemed to be a real expert. The Peak. Chapter 1473. Dear host, this guy is really persistent. Yun Bushio looked at Tanghua and forgot about Tangji, who was standing at the side. He quickly cupped his hands. Eldest princess. He was still a little excited. After all, he hadn't seen her for a few months. Tangji, is the future state preceptor biased against him? His eyes were glued to his Guo-er. Guo-er came at the right time. Young Master Yun will be the state preceptor of Baixia in the future, the emperor said with a smile. He was obviously very happy about Yun Bushio becoming the state preceptor. Tanghua nodded lightly and smiled. So it's the Lord State Preceptor. Sorry for the disrespect. I don't dare. Yun Bushio saw that Tanghua acted as if she didn't know him, and his heart sank. He didn't know if she really didn't remember him, or if she was prejudiced because of what happened last time. Even if she knew him, she pretended not to know him. In any case, he had already entered the palace and would have more opportunities to interact with her in the future. First of all, he had to change her impression of him and let her understand that this time, he really didn't have any other intentions. He just wanted to be friends with her. Yun Bushio was in a daze when he heard Tanghua's voice. Imperial Father, this son wants to ask Imperial Father to agree to something. Oh? Guo-er actually has something that you want me to agree to? The emperor was very surprised. This daughter of his was very intelligent. Don't think that he didn't know. In these few months, his daughter and daughter's relationship had become better. The crown prince improved so much in just a few months. It definitely had something to do with his precious daughter. Guo-er, tell me first. What do you want me to agree to? Tanghua raised her head and said seriously, this son wants to move to the princess residence. System, dear host, have you seriously considered it, or did you just decide on the spur of the moment? The system glanced at Yun Bushio, who had a broken expression and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. See, this is the consequence of offending the great host. Ignoring you is ignoring you. A small mistake needs thousands of times of good performance to make up for. Guo-er has taken a fancy to that family's young master? You want to recruit him as your son-in-law? The empress couldn't sit still anymore. How come she didn't know that Tanghua was going to move to the princess mansion? She had never heard her mention it before. The empress couldn't be blamed for thinking this way. In the past, the princesses would only move to the princess residence after they got married. The emperor was stunned for a moment before he asked, That's right, Guo-er. I wonder which family's talent has the honor of being chosen by you? Tangji was also curious. He thought about it silently. Recently, Guer didn't seem to have any special praise for that scholar. Yun Bushio could not sit still. First, Tangwa wanted to move out. He had just entered the palace. If she left the palace to live, wouldn't his efforts be in vain? He really didn't know if she did it on purpose or if it was just a coincidence. Now that he heard what the Emperor and Empress said, he couldn't sit still anymore. Why didn't he know who could catch her eye? Your son has not taken a fancy to anyone. Yun Bushio was the first to breathe a sigh of relief, but he was also disappointed. Of course, on the surface, he still maintained a faint smile and looked at ease. No one knew that he almost went crazy from anxiety just now. There was still a long way to go. As long as she didn't take a fancy to anyone else, it was fine. Your son only wants to move out of the palace. Your son has some thoughts in mind. I think it would be more convenient to do these things in the princess residence. A princess who had not become a nun had no reason to move to the princess residence. It didn't make sense. Chapter 1474. Tangwa found a perfect excuse. Whether it was the emperor, the empress, or the ministers in the court, they would not think that it was inappropriate for her to live in the princess's mansion. In this era, there was still prejudice against unmarried women. She wanted to have the status of a princess, but she did not want to be restricted by the secular world. She wanted to do something different, and the people would be grateful for it. What is it? At this moment, everyone's curiosity was piqued. I have been reading some books about crops recently and have checked many ancient books. I found that the crop yield is not optimistic. Even in a bumper year, after deducting the rations and taxes, there is only a little surplus. The emperor and Tang Ji's faces became serious. The kingdom of Northern Xia was a prosperous and peaceful country. It was already very good compared to many other countries. But this good could only be based on the fact that the people had enough to wear and eat. It was not possible to say that all the people were rich. If there is a rainy season or a drought, the crops will either be flooded or there will be no harvest. Tangwa's worried look made the system laugh crazily. The host was acting more and more like it. I am a first-rank female and can't do anything big, but I want to try and see if I can change everything. I hope that one day, I can increase the yield and let the poor people in the kingdom of Northern Xia have food and clothing. Hearing this, everyone present was in awe. The emperor was a little shocked. He did not expect his daughter to have such thoughts. Wasn't it? What the people cared about was food and clothing. As for the yield, it was a disease in the heart of every country's emperor. It was fine in normal times, but when there was a disaster or a war, the people were the ones who suffered. If the people were not full, it was easy to cause trouble. If the soldiers were not full, they could not protect the border. The emperor pondered for a while and asked Tangwa about her current thoughts and where to start. Tangwa was already prepared. She picked out some mature and immature ideas. In the end, the emperor agreed to let her move to the princess's mansion. The empress was a little worried. Guo, if you have a talent that you like, you can mention it to your father. If he is good, you can take him as the prince consort. At this moment, Tangwa's face was filled with righteousness. Imperial mother, this son is not interested in the prince consort. Right now, I'm only interested in those crops. In the face of all this, a mere prince consort is nothing. System, Yun Bushio, you're finished. Right now, the host only wants to help the people of Yunxia country increase their food production. She doesn't want to care about you at all. When the emperor heard this, he laughed. You are indeed my good daughter. Guer has great ambitions. Which man is worthy of her? Empress, you don't have to worry. Once Guo succeeds, her name will go down in history. What does a mere prince consort count for? In the emperor's heart, his daughter was no longer a mere princess. If she really succeeded, then her status would rise. In the face of the first princess, who could increase the yield of crops, how could he use love and marriage to restrain her? When Tangwa saw the emperor's expression, she knew that she had achieved her goal. The emperor was not worried about her. After all, she was the crown prince's sister. As long as the two of them were on good terms, and she wasn't interested in the matters of the court, there wouldn't be any conflicts. Vertex. Chapter 1475. In the end, Tangwa successfully moved into the princess residence. Yun Bushio could only watch helplessly as she led the guards that the emperor had assigned to her and left in a grandiose manner. Since that day when they met, they had not spoken a single word. Gongzi, it seems that Her Highness the eldest princess does not want to pay attention to you at all. Although Yun Bushio pitied his Gongzi, the eldest princess really did not want to pay attention to him. Yun Bushio glanced at Yun Bushio. Life has been comfortable recently. If you continue to gossip, scram back to live in a thatched hut. Princess, this subordinate thinks that Her Highness the eldest princess is worried about the suffering of the people and temporarily does not pay attention to you. When she gets familiar with you, she will definitely pay attention to you. Yun Bushio was frightened and quickly changed his words. Tanghua was now living comfortably in the princess residence. Of course, the excuse she found was also being carried out seriously. First, she sent people to inspect various places and brought back some crops so that she could study them properly. Then, at the right time, she took out a must-have crop for transmigration, potatoes. In order to increase the yield of crops in a short period of time, not only did she have to change the seeds, but she also had to adapt the plants to the environment. For the current situation, all these required a certain amount of time. Potatoes were different. They were easy to store, had a high yield, and were especially filling. First, she took out this thing to block the mouths of those who doubted her ability. Then, she could slowly carry out the rest of the plan. Since she had this idea, she would definitely carry it out. She could not just give a verbal check, right? In any case, she was also a princess. In the future, her crown prince brother would also be the emperor. When the people were full, the emperor would be comfortable. When the emperor was comfortable, her life as the eldest princess would be even more comfortable. With the reputation of changing the yield of crops, she would be able to do whatever she wanted in the future. No one would dare to interfere with her affairs. In this era, what she wanted was freedom. What she wanted, she had to pay a certain price in exchange. System. The people of Baixia are happy. Really, the host is a serious person. Whatever she says is what it is. If she said that she would let them eat until they were full, she would definitely do it. About 2 months later, the people Tang was sent to various places brought back some crops. The flowers in the princess's garden were all uprooted and planted with these crops. Amidst the chaos, she planted the potatoes in the system space. She was already familiar with the method of fishing in troubled waters. The emperor, the empress, and some ministers who were interested in this had all come to take a look. Seeing that their first princess was serious, regardless of whether she could succeed or not, her sincerity still made them admire her very much. The princess was willing to use her own garden to grow these ugly crops. Her breadth of mind and talent was not something that an ordinary woman could compare with. Under normal circumstances, Yun Bushio was always by the emperor's side. Therefore, he couldn't wait for the emperor to visit the princess's residence so that he could see her more often. These days, he seemed to understand why he couldn't wait to get close to her. It turned out that his soul had been hooked by her at first sight. Unfortunately, his intentions that day were not pure, and she was as intelligent as snow. She had seen through his intentions to lead her to the peach blossom forest, so now she did not like him very much. He kept calling him Imperial Advisor coldly, which made him feel uncomfortable all over. Vertex. Chapter 1476. There was one thing that made Yun Bushio a little happy. Even Her Highness the eldest princess would occasionally need him. For example, she would ask him to help predict the weather and whether it would rain in the next few days. Seeing that it was already summer, Tanghua remembered that there would be a drought in the north at this time every year. Coincidentally, Yun Bushio came with the emperor. She called out to him, "State Preceptor, what instructions does your highness have for me?" Yun Bushio was especially happy to be ordered around by her. As long as she needed him, he felt that being the state preceptor was not for nothing. System. Look at that fawning look. Yun Bushio. Oh, Yun Bushio, what happened to being an otherworldly expert? Look at your entourage. All of them are speechless. Don't you care about your image? State Preceptor, please help me predict whether there will be a drought in the north this year. How will the rainfall in the south be? Will there be a flood or something like that? The moment Tanghua finished speaking, the emperor's face also darkened. If there was such a disaster that could not be stopped by manpower, not only would the people not be able to eat their fill, but their lives might also be in danger. Especially where there was a flood, it really came without any warning. He was happy that Yun Bushio could join Bei Xia because he liked Yun Bushio's divination ability. Okay, I will do the divination right away. Speaking of which, after coming to Bei Xia, Yun Bushio had not done any divination. He usually did not do any divination. Once he did, it would be a major matter. After all, divination also took a lot of effort. Now that Tanghua asked about this matter, it was considered part of his duty. He was now the state preceptor of Bei Xia. However, even if he did not do any divination, he had a faint feeling recently that Bei Xia, which was originally showing signs of decline, seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. Yun Bushio's divination was not as complicated as the legend said, but the divination was a major matter, so it still took some time. After waiting for about 2 hours, Yun Bushio's face was a little pale. "Ingzhu, go and pour a cup of tea for the state preceptor." "Yes, Your Highness." Yun Bushio opened his eyes. At the last moment, his furrowed brows relaxed, and there was a faint smile on his face. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, there is no flood in the south this year, but the drought in the north will be more serious." The emperor was a little surprised. Since the drought is so serious, why is the imperial tutor still smiling? That's because even if the drought in the north is severe, it won't be like the past, where not a single grain will be harvested. There will be situations where people will starve to death. After that, Yun Bushio looked at Tanghua with a smile on her face. It turned out that the reason why the northern summer country's qi was running so well was all because of the first princess. However, he could not divine the origin of the mysterious first princess. He only knew that her luck was great, and there was a thick layer of fog around her body that concealed her true body. Even though he noticed some abnormalities, he still couldn't see through them. The emperor was a smart person. When he saw Yun Bushio looking at Tanghua, he asked, "Guer, do you have any ideas?" "Your Majesty is wise. A few months ago, I sent people to various places and even other countries to collect crop seeds. I wanted to study them first, but I didn't expect to accidentally find a treasure. With it, I can guarantee that there will be no more hungry people." This treasure was, of course, potatoes. She was the one who took out the potatoes, and there were varieties suitable for various places. "Where is it?" The emperor was a little surprised. "When I discovered the magic of this crop, I sent people to plant 3 mu of land. If your Majesty has nothing to do, you can go and take a look today." Peak. Chapter 1477. Tanghua brought the emperor and Yun Bushio to the potato plantation. They saw with their own eyes that there were big, round potatoes dug out from the soil. There were so many of them under a single seedling. It was a high-yield potato. "What is this called? How do we eat it?" The emperor asked the key question. "This is potato," Tanghua explained. "My subordinates might have brought back some crops and accidentally mixed them in. Later on, they were planted by accident." Looking at them, I thought of an unofficial history book I once read and learned their name and how to eat them. But they can be steamed, boiled, stir-fried, mixed, or even roasted. "Father, let's have potatoes for lunch today." The emperor agreed readily. Even Yun Bushio was very interested in these round potatoes. After having a potato feast, the emperor found that roasted, steamed, or boiled potatoes were very filling. He was almost full after eating 1 or 2. As for the stir-fried shredded potatoes, they could be a dish in front of everyone. After asking about the yield and maturity time of these potatoes, the emperor did not care about anything else. He hurriedly sent a decree back and summoned all his ministers. Tanghua also handed these 3 acres of land to the emperor. Now that potatoes had been produced, it was up to the emperor to popularize and let the people plant them. Tanghua intended to return to the princess residence, but the emperor quickly stopped her. "Guer, stay here first. I still have a lot to ask you." "Imperial father, there are old farmers who specialize in planting potatoes here. They are all very experienced. In the past few months, they know more about potato planting than this son. I still have to go back and study other crops. I don't want to waste any time." The main reason was that the sun was too hot here. She did not want to bask in the sun at all. System. Host, you are such a dog. The system was speechless when it felt the awe of the ministers around it. All right, to Madam Host, this wasn't much, but to them, it was extraordinary. The ministers were thinking that the eldest princess was dedicated to the people but did not take credit. She was the one who had such precious and high-yield potatoes, but she gave all the credit to these old farmers. Look, it was a sunny day, but she still wanted to go back and study other crops. They could not compare to the eldest princess. Tangwa left under the admiring gazes of the ministers. From today onwards, her status in Baixia was different from before. No one would just treat her as a princess. In short, she had a special status in this country and was especially free. She had 3 purposes for doing all this. First, to achieve personal freedom in Baixia. Secondly, since she had come to this place, and her parents and brother were all good people who stood at the top of this country, she also hoped that this world would become better and better. Third, she was prepared to leave the imperial city in a few years. Why did he leave the imperial city? Lu Qing still hadn't been punished, so why didn't he kill Lu Qing now? Killing him would not relieve his anger. What she wanted to do was to save Lin Yuexiang. At the same time, she wanted to find evidence that Lu Qing sent people to assassinate Lin Yuexiang and her son. She also wanted to personally nurture Lu Qing's son, LV Yufan, to become the right-hand man of her brother, the crown prince. Peak. Chapter 1478. She wanted LV Yufan to stand on high ground and personally expose Lu Qing's sins. As for Lin Yuexiang, she also had to change. If the other party was interested, she would help to arrange a good marriage. She didn't want Lu Qing to die so easily. She only wanted Lu Qing to regret it so much that he would rather die. System. What a terrible woman. In just half a month, the emperor issued a decree to popularize potatoes. First, he ordered people to cook the potatoes and asked the passers-by to pay for it. Then, he gave out the first batch of potatoes for free for the people to plant. Naturally, some people were unwilling, but half of the people were still willing. The emperor didn't take away Tangwa's credit. Instead, he directly announced to the world that the appearance of potatoes was because of Her Highness, the eldest princess. The first batch of people who planted potatoes were very happy when they saw the harvest. In the following time, Tangwa would occasionally take out some new varieties, which were all short growing periods. For example, some fruits and vegetables that were easy to plant. The people in the imperial city were really living a comfortable life. Thinking of the drought in a few months, the emperor ordered the planting of potatoes and sent people to places where there would be drought to let the people there take precautions. Lu Qing saw all these things. How did he feel now? That was regret, extreme regret. Why did he use such a clumsy plan? In the end, he didn't manage to plot against the eldest princess. Instead, he had to become Tang Shi's son-in-law in order to save his life. Although he was living a good life now, if he was the eldest princess's son-in-law, he didn't know how glorious he would be now. Especially these things that Tangwa cultivated. Just a small one was enough for him to do a lot of things. What a pity. Lu Qing sat in the study with a frown on his face. Prince Consort, what's wrong with you? Wanju had been well-behaved these few months, so she couldn't be unruly. Tang Shi didn't like her, but she didn't treat her badly. The main thing was that Lu Qing didn't seem to see her. She wanted to do something, but she couldn't. Today, Tang Shi had asked someone to go out to play. Otherwise, she wouldn't have had the chance to get close to Lu Qing. Her heart ached when she saw Lu Qing frowning. When Lu Qing heard Wanju's voice, he suddenly raised his head and looked at the handsome Wanju. He was stunned for a moment. Wasn't Wanju one of the eldest princess's men? Wanju, what can I do for you, Prince Consort? Recently, the eldest princess has done many things for the Northern Summer Kingdom. I would like to ask, do you know about these things? He felt that the appearance of those crops definitely didn't happen overnight. Replying to the Prince Consort, Wanju doesn't know that the princess used to live in the imperial palace and only moved out of the princess residence a few months ago. Lu Qing was a little disappointed. He did not dare to provoke Tangwa, but he was very interested in those crops. It seemed that he had to start with Tang Shi. Just when Wanju thought that Lu Qing might do something with her, Lu Qing stood up and walked out of the study. Hey, Prince Consort, where are you going? I'm going to find the second prince. When Wanju heard this, he was so angry that he stomped his feet and pursed his lips. No one knew what he was thinking. The next day, Tangwa's princess residence welcomed two uninvited guests, Tang Shi and Lu Qing. Second royal sister? Royal sister? Tang Shi's face was full of smiles. Royal sister is really in the limelight recently. Now, the entire city's citizens are talking about you. I heard that even the ministers are full of praise for you. Second royal sister, is there anything you need from me? Tangwa was bending over and fiddling with a long green vine. Tang Shi didn't know what it was, so she didn't beat around the bush. Royal sister, my prince consort is very interested in these crops, so second brother-in-law wants to be a farmer? Tangwa raised her head and asked in surprise. System. Ah, what do you mean by wanting to be a farmer? Peak. Chapter 1479. Tang Shi did not expect Tangwa to ask such a question. She hurriedly said, Imperial sister, you misunderstood. Prince Consort is only interested in various crops. Recently, Imperial sister has been constantly cultivating new fruits and vegetables to benefit the people of Bei Xia. Prince Consort and I admire you. It's like this. Prince Consort also wants to participate. I heard that Imperial sister is recruiting talents from all over the country. Prince Consort is willing to contribute a little. After becoming the Prince Consort, he would not be able to enter the imperial court as an official. But that doesn't mean that she can't do other things. Everyone knows that what Tangwa is doing right now is something that will go down in history. Lu Qing did not want to go down in history, but the benefits he could obtain in the end were very tempting. To put it bluntly, he was here to steal the technology and seeds. With these things, if he did not dare to do it openly, couldn't he do it secretly? Bei Xia was so big. As long as it was done well, the benefits would be huge. Lu Qing did not want to go down in history, but it did not mean that he did not want power. He chose Princess Shang because he did not want to spend too much time fighting in other places. Who knew if the emperor would still remember him after 2 years? It would not be so easy to return to the capital. If he did not have any achievements, it would be even harder to get promoted. Like the current officials in the imperial court, which one of them did not work hard for decades to achieve their current achievements? To put it bluntly, Lu Qing wanted to reach the heavens in one step. Now that he was the second prince consort, there was no fate between him and the eldest princess. Fortunately, there was always a way out. The second princess had a twin brother, the third prince. He was a low-profile person, but he was full of talent. He did not think that the third prince was worse than the crown prince. He could vaguely feel the third prince's desire for revenge. If he had the seeds of these crops, he would be able to make a lot of money and support the third prince. So second brother-in-law also wants to benefit the people. Tangwa stood up straight. Ingzhu quickly used a handkerchief to help her wipe away the mud and water on her hands. She continued, It is rare for second brother-in-law to have such a sincere heart, but it's very hard to do all these. Can you bear it? Tangwa's eyes fell on Lu Qing's face. Although Lu Qing was born in a poor family, he had never suffered before. Because he had always wanted to take the imperial examinations, his ability to study was indeed not bad. When his parents were still alive, they would not let him suffer and would give him all the good things. Not to mention farming, he didn't even hand over firewood once. Even before his parents died, they had arranged a good marriage for him. In the Lin family, Lin Yuexiang felt that he could make a name for himself. How could she wrong him? Lin Yuexiang took care of all the household chores. Besides, in these times, when merchants and peasants were heavily influenced, scholars were worthy of respect. Tangwa looked at the soft and tender Lu Qing and had a bad taste in her heart. System. He could feel that Lu Qing was about to suffer. When Lu Qing heard Tangwa's words, he straightened his back and put on a righteous appearance. Imperial sister is a princess and has a precious body. If you can do this, why can't Lu Qing do it? Oh, so second brother-in-law isn't afraid of suffering? Lu Qing said very seriously. I'm not afraid. Tangwa fell into deep thought. Tang Shi saw that Lu Qing cared so much and said anxiously, Imperial sister, The prince consort has finally found something meaningful. For my sake, let him join. The Peak. Chapter 1480. Since second brother-in-law isn't afraid of suffering, then I'll say the ugly words first. Once you join, you have to work for at least 3 months. Tanghua looked at Lu Qing with a smile. Second brother-in-law, I'm sure you can understand how important the things under my hands are to our Baixia country. It's not child's play. I understand. Then you have to promise me that once you join, no matter how difficult or tiring it is, you have to grit your teeth and persevere for 3 months. Of course, it would be best if you can persevere for half a month. You're the prince consort of our Baixia country. If you can't endure it for 2 days and shrink back, then wouldn't that be a disgrace to our royal family? Royal sister is right. Lu Qing will definitely not shrink back. Lu Qing didn't think that this was difficult. It was also because he had been raised too well since he was young that he didn't know that every meal on the plate was a result of hard work and sweat. All right, with your promise and second royal sister's words, then I'll give you a chance. Hearing this, Lu Qing finally let out a sigh of relief. Tangxi was also a little happy. She liked Lu Qing very much. If she could help Lu Qing, she felt that Lu Qing would become more and more inseparable from her. Of course, now that Lu Qing had a good relationship with her royal brother, Tangxi also understood some things. Who didn't want their royal brother to be in control? Compared to being a little second princess, she preferred being the eldest princess. The two of them bid farewell to Tanghua and left happily. Not long after, Tangji hurried to the princess residence. Guo Tangji was a little confused. Why did you agree to let Lu Qing join? Tanghua first glanced at Yun Buxiu, who was following behind Tangji. This person was really shameless. When the emperor came to her princess residence, she followed the emperor. When her crown prince came to the princess residence, she followed the crown prince. She was like a piece of sticky candy. System. Dear host, look, Yun Buxiu is secretly peeking at you. She's not looking at you openly. That look of longing for attention. Ha ha ha, it's hilarious. Tanghua didn't seem to see Yun Buxiu. She said to Tangji in a low voice, my sister said that my brother-in-law is very interested in crops. Since they both care about the common people, I can't ignore their sincerity. Guo why don't you tell me what you think? These crops are extremely important. If they are used by someone with ill intentions, royal brother, you're thinking too much. It's second brother-in-law who wants to use a special method to repay the northern summer country. I really can't stop him. Why don't imperial brother come again tomorrow and see second brother-in-law's loyalty to the country? Tangji already felt that something was wrong. He always felt that his sister's words were full of sarcasm, and there was a teasing look in her eyes. He asked quietly, Guo are you messing with Lu Qing? Tell me, what do you want to do with him? Why would I mess with him? I'm just fulfilling second brother-in-law's wish. Tangji was speechless. Forget it. I'll come again tomorrow and see what you want to do. State Preceptor, let's return to the palace. Yun Buxiu, why don't you stay a little longer? You've just arrived. Why don't you have lunch before returning to the palace? Tangji didn't seem to see Yun Buxiu's gaze and strode out. Yun Buxiu glanced back at Tanghua and left reluctantly. Dear host, I'm dying of laughter. Look at Yun Buxiu. How much does he want to stay? Royal brother won't let him stay. The system was a little shocked. Host, what do you mean? Peak. Chapter 1481. Literally, royal brother isn't a fool. He wouldn't allow Yun Buxiu to snatch his little sister away. System. So, Tangji saw through Yun Buxiu's intentions and deliberately brought him here. Then, he left immediately after finishing his words. This was torturing Yun Buxiu. State Preceptor. It must have been hard for you to follow me around every day. Tangji glanced at Yun Buxiu, who was slowly following him, and sneered in his heart. Humph. He was wondering why Yun Buxiu, who only liked to be idle, came to Baixia to be the state preceptor. It turned out that he wanted to snatch his sister away. No way. Give up. Guo will always be the most honorable princess in Baixia. How could he let Yun Buxiu, who had no status, succeed? Unfortunately, I am also very interested in crops. The eldest princess is really an extraordinary woman. Tangji snorted in his heart. No matter how extraordinary she has no part in it. She is only his sister. Guo did not seem to have any thoughts about Yun Buxiu and did not want to marry a prince consort. In that case, he would definitely protect Guo. In Baixia, no one could force his Guo. If she did not want to get married, then she would not get married. She would be a noble princess for the rest of her life. Yun Buxiu, where did you come from? Just scram back to where you came from. I see. Let's go back to the palace. I still have to see my father. Now, due to the drought in the north, there was no harvest. Because of the early warning, the people could still survive for a period of time. Fortunately, they were well prepared and had already sent carts of potatoes and other grains to the north. As the crown prince, he had to supervise these things and was very busy. The next day, Lu Qing arrived at the crop field early in the morning. Tanghua also came early. After all, she had something important to do today. Ingzhu, go and get some clothes for second brother-in-law. Lu Qing was a little surprised. Did he still need to change clothes? Then, he took a set of coarse hemp clothes from Ingzhu. Second prince consort, please go and change your clothes first. The prince consort's attire is complicated and not suitable for such things, Ingzhu explained in a low voice. When Lu Qing saw that everyone was looking at him, he followed Ingzhu to change into a coarse hemp robe. To be honest, even though he was born poor, he had never worn clothes made of this kind of material. It was very uncomfortable. When he came back, there was a short, tanned old farmer standing beside Tanghua. The sun gradually rose, and these old farmers were all wearing straw hats. Ingzhu also gave a straw hat to Lu Qing. Second prince consort, when the sun gets bigger, remember to wear the straw hat to block the sun. Lu Qing held the straw hat in a daze. He wanted to say that he wasn't here to be a farmer and that the first princess had misunderstood something. At this moment, Tanghua spoke up. This is the second princess's son-in-law. This commoner greets second prince consort. Lu Qing hurriedly put on a smile, indicating that there was no need to be polite here. Tanghua pursed her lips and said with a smile, second prince consort is also a person who cares about the country and the people. He knows that food on the plate is not easy and he cares about the people. He specially joined you and is willing to do what he can. Okay, everyone, next, I will have to trouble you to guide the humble and studious second prince consort. Don't worry, your highness. This commoner will teach second prince consort well. I guarantee that in the future, he will be able to grow good food. The old farmers were still a little happy. Especially when they received Tanghua's instructions, they were even happier. Peak. Chapter 1482. Second brother-in-law, go ahead. Tanghua looked at Lu Qing with a smile. Didn't you want to learn more about these crops? The old farmers here are all experts in growing vegetables and grains. Outsiders won't have the chance to learn. Lu Qing was wearing a coarse hemp garment and holding a straw hat. He vaguely felt that it was different from what he had imagined. He looked around and realized that in this farm field, other than Tanghua's people and the people guarding the field, the rest were all old farmers. He thought that he would be able to watch them work every day after joining. He never thought that he would have to personally farm. This was really different from what he had imagined. In a while, Lord Qin, Lord Su, and Lord Wu from the Ministry of Agriculture will also come to record the situation here. They might also come to familiarize themselves with the crops. Tanghua said, second brother-in-law, you should learn from the old farmers first. When Lu Qing heard that the court officials were also coming to farm, he understood that it was really different from what he had imagined. He could only follow the two old farmers. This was the only thing he could do at the moment. He didn't know why, but he felt a little regretful. Who knew that this place would be like this? Second prince consort, do you know what the most important first step is to start growing these crops? The old farmer asked. Lu Qing hesitated for a moment and said, digging a hole? System. Pft. Isn't that digging a hole? You're in a hole right now. Digging a hole is only one step before planting the seeds. Lu Qing hurriedly said, please advise me. With so many people watching, he still had to perform well. Since he had already made such a big sacrifice, He had to learn some skills. The old farmer stroked his beard and said, "The first step is to remove the weeds." With that, he pointed to a field with weeds growing on it. "Second prince consort, please remove the weeds with this commoner." Just like that. Yes, remove the weeds. If you don't remove the weeds, the seeds will be planted in the field. The weeds will steal the fertilizer and hinder the growth of the seeds, affecting the future yield. Tangwa sat at the side and drank tea while watching Lu Qing bend over to remove the weeds. A large field of weeds was finally removed after half the morning. Lu Qing was already panting from exhaustion and his face was red. He originally didn't want to wear the straw hat, but because it couldn't withstand the scorching sun, he had no choice but to wear it. He regretted coming. He shouldn't have come. Looking at the vigorous old farmers around him and Tangwa who was staring at him without blinking, he couldn't say that he didn't want to do it. It hadn't even been half a day. It would be too embarrassing for him to give up. The current Lu Qing was really riding a tiger and unable to dismount. Lu Qing nodded. He needed to rest. If he didn't, he felt like he was going to faint. He walked to the side and sat down. Tangwa smiled and asked, "Second brother-in-law, are you all right?" Lu Qing hurriedly said and squeezed out a smile. "I didn't expect that planting crops would be so troublesome. It can be considered a new experience." "Oh, then I'm relieved." From this, it seems that second brother-in-law has made up his mind. Tangwa smiled. "Ingzhu, go and pour some herbal tea." This was the first time Lu Qing felt approval from Tangwa. He immediately became more energetic. He still felt regret towards Tangwa. After all, she was his target from the start. Now, he could only say that he missed it. However, to be able to gain her approval, he felt that the weeds were not removed in vain. After Ingzhu served the herbal tea, Lu Qing didn't have his usual gentleness and directly drank it in big gulps. "Second prince consort, we're going to move on to the second step." Chapter 1483. Hearing the old farmer's words, Lu Qing couldn't help but ask, "Is the second step digging a hole?" "No. Second prince consort, do you think the ground is flat when you step on it?" "Is it hard?" "It's a little flat, but it's also very hard." "That's right. If you dig a hole in such hard soil and plant seeds, they won't grow well and will affect their growth." "Prince consort, you know how to plant flowers, right? You also need to loosen the soil regularly to facilitate the growth of flowers." Hearing the old farmer's words, Lu Qing felt that it made sense and asked, "Then what's the second step?" Just as he finished asking, Lu Qing heard the sound of cows. He raised his head and saw 2 oxen being led over. He had seen oxen before, and he had also heard of one thing: oxen plowing the ground. Looking at second prince consort's enlightened expression, you clearly understand what the second step is. The old farmer smiled. "That's right. The next step is to plow the ground." Lu Qing, he shouldn't have come. Who knew that he had to plow the ground? He didn't know how and didn't want to. Could he leave? When Tang Ji and Yun Buxiu arrived, they saw the most handsome man in the field. The cows were walking in front, and Lu Qing was holding the plow and plowing the ground. Even though he was wearing a straw hat, his face was red from the sun, and bean-sized beads of sweat kept dripping from his forehead into the soil. His coarse linen clothes were already soaked. Tang Ji, if he wasn't mistaken, the person plowing the fields, who looked out of place among the old farmers, was Lu Qing, right? Yun Buxiu only glanced at Lu Qing before her gaze landed on Tangwa, who was sitting under the shade of a tree and enjoying the cool breeze. A palace maid was fanning her palm leaf fan and leisurely drinking herbal tea. Her Highness the eldest princess looked really happy. Tangji hurriedly sat beside Tangwa and asked softly, "Guo, is this what you said yesterday?" "Yes, second brother-in-law said that he wanted to learn how to plant crops, so I naturally had to arrange for the old farmers to teach him well. These old farmers are experts in planting crops. You can't find such a powerful person outside." Tangji held back his laughter. His sister was really something. Even the reason she gave was so dignified. "Yes, second brother-in-law's plowing posture is also very skilled and standard. It seems that you have put in a lot of effort." Tangji praised with a serious face. Tangwa waved her fan. "Isn't that so? Previously, I was still doubting second brother-in-law's ability. I didn't expect him to be so powerful. I really underestimated him. Imperial brother, second brother-in-law, is plowing the fields under the scorching sun on such a hot summer day. His determination is admirable. That's right. Second brother-in-law is indeed not bad. As expected of a top scholar, he is humble and eager to learn. If you do well in your studies, you will be better at plowing than others. The two siblings sat under the shade of the tree, praising each other one after another. One after another, high hats were placed on Lu Qing's head, making him suffer unspeakably, especially when he saw that the old farmers around him also looked like they admired him. He wanted to put down the plow, but he had no choice but to continue. Finally, it was noon. When the plowing was almost done, the old farmers came to call Lu Qing for lunch. Lu Qing was able to persevere to this extent because he was thick-skinned. He didn't want to be mocked by others. If he couldn't do it in one day, how would he get the seeds? In order not to let today's efforts go to waste, he had to grit his teeth and persevere. 3 months' time was enough for him to grasp many key points. During lunch, Lu Qing ate 3 big bowls of white rice for the first time. He ate crudely, without any trace of his previous gentleness. Second brother-in-law, are you okay? Tanghua asked again. Lu Qing quickly said, no problem. Peek. Chapter 1484. Oh, then continue to work hard. The old farmers are full of praise for second brother-in-law. They said that you learned it immediately. Tanghua's face was full of praise. It can be seen that second brother-in-law is indeed a smart person. Lu Qing felt much better after being praised by Tanghua in public. Yes, I also didn't expect second brother-in-law to be so amazing. Tangji also praised. Yun Buxiu also joined in. Second prince consort is born with intelligence. No matter what he learns, he is very fast. How can plowing be a problem for him? After the 3 of them finished speaking, they looked at each other and finally continued to praise Lu Qing. After the meal, the old farmer came to get Lu Qing again. Next, it was time to dig a hole and plant. Lu Qing memorized these steps in his heart. He planned to secretly move some seeds away when he planted them in the future. This was because there were many varieties of crops that didn't exist outside the farm. Everything here was strictly guarded by the imperial family. Ordinary people couldn't enter. After he got the seeds, he would never come here again. But when it was time to plant them, he was a little dumbfounded when he saw the old farmer give him a bunch of seedlings. Second prince consort, look, just put the seedlings' roots in like this commoner and bury them in the soil. That will do. Lu Qing hesitated for a moment and asked, why are we planting seedlings? Shouldn't we be planting seeds? Now we are planting vegetables. The old farmer explained. After 10 days or half a month, they can be picked to eat. Then there are seeds for vegetables too, right? The environment here is not suitable for growing seedlings. The seedlings were brought from elsewhere. Lu Qing's face darkened. So, after working hard for so long, he still didn't know where the seeds were brought from? Imperial brother, today's lychees are very sweet. Where did they come from? Tangji glanced at Yun Buxiu. They were brought by the state preceptor. Oh, the state preceptor. Tanghua finally looked at Yun Buxiu. Yun Buxiu quickly smiled. Your Highness, do you like lychees? I like them. Then I will ask someone to send some to the princess's residence another day? Sure. Tanghua ate the lychee and didn't refuse. I want it sweet. If it's not sweet, this consort will punish you. I guarantee it's sweet. Yun Buxiu finally heaved a sigh of relief. At least the princess wanted to eat his lychees and talk to him. She no longer wanted him to predict the weather tomorrow. This could be considered an improvement, right? System, that's all I have. Tanghua was not afraid of Lu Qing stealing the seeds at all. Those seeds needed a specific temperature and environment to grow into seedlings. It was not as simple as Lu Qing thought. In the future, when these things spread throughout the entire northern Xia country, even if Lu Qing obtained the seeds, it would be useless. He wouldn't be able to gain any benefits. It would simply be a waste of effort. Given the current situation, it would be possible to popularize these things within a year. She had plenty of high-level seeds. Seeing Lu Qing's face red from the sun as he squatted on the ground to plant seedlings, she was overjoyed. Yun Buxiu felt that Tanggua's joy seemed to come from Lu Qing. To be exact, she was happy when Lu Qing was unlucky. So, she didn't like Lu Qing? For several days, Lu Qing was tortured by the old farmers. He wanted to rest, but Tanggua would go to the crop field early in the morning and ask someone to bring a soft cushion. She would sit under the shade of a tree and watch them work. He made a promise in front of Tanggua. With her watching, he didn't have the face to slack off. In just a few days, Lu Qing became tanned. Peak. Chapter 1485. When Tang Shi saw that Lu Qing was so tanned, her heart ached. She hurriedly asked Lu Qing what was going on. Lu Qing then told him about the matter of plowing the land. How can Imperial Sister let Prince Consort do this? Tang Shi pursed her lips. Even if she doesn't want him to do this, she shouldn't bully you like this. Let's go. I want to talk to Imperial Sister. Lu Qing wanted to stop Tang Shi, but he couldn't. When they arrived at the farm, Tang Shi was stopped. Why can't this princess go in? Tang Shi didn't expect that these guards would not let her in. The guards were not afraid of Tang Shi at all and only said respectfully, replying to Second Princess, His Majesty has ordered that without the permission of His Majesty, the Crown Prince and the eldest princess, no one can go in. Hearing this, Tang Shi felt sullen. She was the second princess of Bei Xia, but she couldn't even see a small field. The more she thought about it, the more uncomfortable she felt. Since when could Imperial Sister be on par with Imperial Father and the Crown Prince? If her mother was the Empress and her brother was the Crown Prince, she would definitely not be so aggrieved. Then why aren't you going to report to Imperial Sister? This princess also wants to go in and see the newly cultivated crops of Bei Xia. Although she was sullen, Tang Shi wasn't a stupid person. She knew that with her ability, she couldn't compete with Tanggua. It was not advisable to force her way in. At this moment, the seed of ambition that was buried in Tang Shi's heart finally sprouted. Imperial Sister, are you dissatisfied with my Prince Consort? Tang Shi asked. Prince Consort cares about the people and wants to participate in the cultivation of crops. How is eldest sister dissatisfied with him that you want him to plow the fields? Although Prince Consort doesn't have a good background, he is still a scholar and a top scholar. Isn't it inappropriate to let him plow the fields? Tanggua swallowed the lychee in her mouth and asked in confusion, Second Imperial Sister, when have I been dissatisfied with second brother-in-law? If not, why does Imperial Sister want Prince Consort to plow the fields? Tang Shi whispered. In less than 10 days, Prince Consort not only lost a lot of weight, but he also got tanned. Tang Shi wanted to say something more, but she suddenly saw a few familiar voices in the field. She wanted to seek justice for Lu Qing, but the words got stuck in her throat and she couldn't say it. If she didn't see wrongly, those figures were the Ministry of Agriculture. Why were they also wearing coarse hemp clothes, rolling up their trousers and sleeves? What were they digging in the soil for? Second Royal Sister, as you can see, these officials are all old officials in the court. Now they are also working in the fields to understand and cultivate crops. Tuzas. In. For the future of the northern summer country, for the sake of the many citizens, they don't need to do as little as second brother-in-law. In fact, they are doing much more than second brother-in-law. Look at them. Their hair is already white, but they are still willing to do it personally. Tang Shi was speechless. Second Imperial Sister, if you really love second brother-in-law and don't want him to suffer, why don't you let second brother-in-law give up? Tanggua glanced at Lu Qing, who was running from afar, and raised her voice slightly. I know second Imperial Sister doesn't want second brother-in-law to suffer. In that case, from today onwards, second brother-in-law doesn't need to come. Imperial Sister, wait. Lu Qing hurriedly stopped her. Peek. Chapter 1486. Imperial Sister, I'm not afraid of hardships. Even these old adults are willing to work in the fields. I, Lu Qing, am still in my prime. Why should I be afraid? Lu Qing held Tang Shi's hand. Princess, I understand your thoughts, but I've already made up my mind. It's only been less than 10 days. If I withdraw now, I don't know how many people will laugh at me. Lu Qing hooked Tang Xi's finger and whispered, Princess, this matter is very important to me. Tang Xi remembered the plan between the third prince and Lu Qing, so she could only give up persuading Lu Qing to leave. Her imperial brother was right. If they were just ordinary princes and princesses, they would be bound for life. If she succeeded in the future, she would be the emperor's younger sister and the princess royal of Xia. She would be even more glorious than Tanghua. Tang Xi did not stop him, so Lu Qing continued to work in the fields. It had been almost 10 days, although he was tired and his back hurt every day. In any case, he had some harvest. In these few days, he had directly planted seeds of crops. He secretly memorized the methods and moved some of them away. 3 months was enough for him to take away a lot of crops. When the time came, he would find some talents and teach them these methods. He was not afraid that they would not be able to cultivate high yields and new varieties of crops. For the sake of his great cause, Lu Qing worked hard. He was completely unaware that his small movements were clearly seen by Tanghua. Tang Xi watched for a while, but she really did not want to continue watching. She bid farewell to Tanghua and left. Seeing that the sun was gradually rising, several ministers of the Ministry of Agriculture who were working in the fields hurriedly came to the shade of the trees. Tang Xi saw these ministers working in the fields, but she did not know that they were mainly observing the growth of the crops, recording their growth patterns and the environmental temperature every day. They were not like Lu Qing, who had to work in the fields. When the sun rose, they would quickly come back and hide in the shade of the trees, discussing with Tanghua where various crops should be grown. In the beginning, Tanghua had indeed taken out the seeds that she needed, but for a long-term plan, she still had to teach them how to fish. Therefore, the matter of cultivating the seeds had to be slowly tested by these people. She had ready-made technology here. She only needed to give them some pointers to guide them to the right path. It would be much faster than them fumbling around on their own. Your Highness, I believe that the grain seeds and vegetables planted here are already very mature. It's time to popularize them. The seeds we've collected over the past few months should be enough for the first batch of villagers who are willing to try planting them. Even if they provided the crops and the technology, not everyone was willing to give up their original crops and leave their fields empty to plant new crops. If it failed and the production was not good, they would starve to death. Then let's popularize it, starting from the imperial city and spreading it outside. Then when this subject attends court tomorrow, this subject will ask the emperor to beat up this matter. Tanghua smiled and nodded. Thank you for your hard work these days. It's all thanks to you coming here every day to record the seeds so that we can pick out the best ones and identify the environment they grow in and the temperature they adapt to. How can we compare to Your Highness? Without Your Highness, this place would still be a wasteland. It's all thanks to Your Highness's concern for the common people that we can have today. You want the common people to have enough to eat and wear. After flattering both sides, the ministers held the record books and left, chatting and laughing. The summit. Chapter 1487. Tanghua glanced at Lu Qing, who was still working hard in the fields. His skin was getting darker and darker, and he looked like a piece of charcoal. She couldn't help but laugh. The seeds that Lu Qing managed to steal are going to be distributed among the commoners soon. Tanghua was in a good mood. In 3 months, we will be able to harvest some of the shorter crops, not to mention some fruits and vegetables. They can be eaten after 10 days or half a month. I wonder if he will die of anger when the time comes. System. Host. Why are you so bad? How can I be so bad? He was the one who bumped into me. If he didn't have such thoughts, why would I mess with him? System. All right, the host's words, whether they are human words or ghost words, are all reasonable. The next day, the minister from the Ministry of Agriculture wrote a memorial to the emperor. It said that they could start distributing the seeds of the current season, as well as fruits and vegetables, to the commoners. All the officials in the court, except for the minister from the Ministry of Agriculture and the crown prince, didn't know why the emperor was so happy when he saw the memorial. After reading it, he only said one word: approved. After a pause, he added, the crown prince will supervise this matter. These days, he was more and more satisfied with the crown prince. He was neither arrogant nor rash, and he could keep his composure. Previously, when the drought in the north caused the commoners to be unable to harvest a single grain, the crown prince was the one who supervised the delivery of grain. With the previous warning and the timely delivery of grain this time, the commoners didn't starve to death like in the past. The emperor left many things to the crown prince. The third prince, who was standing below, looked as low-key as ever. He didn't know that the memorial said that they were going to distribute the new varieties of crops to the commoners. 3 months later, Lu Qing was no longer the delicate and handsome scholar. He was carrying a hoe, wearing a straw hat and coarse hemp clothes. He looked exactly like a farmer working in the fields. Lu Qing's change made Lu Qing the most uncomfortable. What she fancied was Lu Qing's good appearance. Now that Lu Qing came back to the princess residence every day smelling bad, she disliked it and treated Lu Qing coldly. Lu Qing didn't seem to care. He had already stolen a lot of seeds. They were all in his study. There were several pockets. These seeds were enough for them to operate. It was estimated that in less than a year, they would have a large number of seeds in their hands. Dear host, these people are quite capable. With just a little guidance from you, they can pick out seeds suitable for different environments and soils. Look, these fruits and vegetables are growing really well. This watermelon is really big. I also heard that these people were talking about giving you watermelons in private. The third prince seemed to keep a low profile, but in reality, his heart was in the imperial court. How could he care about the lives of the common people? If he had paid more attention to the lives of the common people, he would have known that the lives of the common people were much better than before. Not only did they have fresh fruits and vegetables to eat, but the crops in the fields were also growing very well. That Lu Qing told me today that he doesn't want to do it anymore. Tangwa sneered. He stole a few big pockets of my seeds. Does he think he can go to heaven? System. Host, if it weren't for you, Lu Qing would have succeeded. Normally, it would take at least 2 to 3 years to popularize these seeds. Lu Qing only needs 1 year. That was why he said that the male and female leads' halos would disappear when they met the host. Peak. Chapter 1488. Not long after, a strange sight appeared at the gate of the imperial city. Countless people in the imperial city went to watch. They were stunned when they saw carts of grain and fruits being transported into the city. These people were all using ox carts and wearing coarse linen clothes. They had happy and honest smiles on their faces. The guards asked them what they were doing here. We are here to thank His Majesty, the Crown Prince, and Her Highness the First Princess, said an elderly man with a smile. This elderly man was the village chief of one of the villages. In the past, their village was very poor and life was hard. Every family did not have enough to eat. Later, the higher-ups gave out seeds, saying that these were new seeds. They had specially inspected the environment of their village to ensure that these seeds could be harvested. With the mentality of giving it a try, the entire village planted these seeds. They did not expect that it would be a big harvest. Even though the grain cycle was relatively long at that time, the fruits and vegetables were enough for them to survive for some time. Now that they had a good harvest, they wanted to thank the people who had let them live a good life. They heard that the first princess was the one who researched and developed the cultivation of seeds. The person who ordered the seeds to be spread to their village was the emperor, and the person who supervised and assigned people to teach them was the crown prince. Therefore, they were here to thank the 3 people. The guards were also shocked, especially when they saw the long line of carriages behind them. Obviously, there was more than one village. After the guards reported to the emperor, they let them into the imperial city. What happened next was very shocking. It was the first time the people of the imperial city saw so many carts of grain and fruits. Moreover, the fruits tied to the carts were really big and round. It was very pleasing to look at. More than half of the ox carts were pulled to the imperial palace, and the other half stopped outside the princess residence. When Tangwa heard these people thanking her, her smile widened. She accepted these things and said, "There will be better seeds in the future. You won't have to live a life of no harvest like before." These farmers hurriedly thanked this beautiful and intelligent princess who still cared about the people. Then, they left in satisfaction. Tangwa kept one cart and distributed the rest to those who worked in the fields and the ministers of the Ministry of Agriculture. The emperor and the crown prince each kept one cart and distributed the rest to the concubines and ministers. The third prince Tang Zhao and the second princess Tang Shi were the emperor's children, so they naturally received some as well. Tang Zhao looked at the big watermelon in front of him and raised his head to glance at Lu Qing, who also had an ugly expression and dark skin. He punched the watermelon. He didn't expect the watermelon to be so hard that his hand turned red. You were there for 3 months. Didn't you hear about the popularization of seeds? Lu Qing was also very hopeful. He was there to steal seeds and technology. He worked so hard every day. How would he know that the seeds he stole would all be distributed to the people? Third brother, why don't I continue to go there? Maybe there will be something new. All right, it's useless to take these things now. The commoners already have such good stuff, and it will only get better and better in the future. Even if we get it, it will be useless. There won't be much profit in it. What should we do next? How would I know what to do? Tang Zhao was furious. He took a deep breath and said, "Don't move. Right now, they are gaining momentum. We don't have any chance." Vertex. Chapter 1489. What's going on next door? Tangwa sat in the courtyard and ate the fruits that the people had given her. She looked at the wall next door. There used to be a big house next door. It had been abandoned and no one lived there. It had been taken back by the royal family. Now that she heard some movement, could it be that her father had given it to someone? Your Highness, should this servant go and ask? Ingzhu asked. Tangwa nodded. Ingzhu quickly ran next door. At the same time, Tangwa asked the system to see what was going on over there. System, it looks like they're renovating the house. Someone should be moving in. It's such a big house and in such a good location. The person living in it should be someone of high status. Tangwa thought for a moment. I wonder who got this house. Just as she finished speaking, Ingzhu ran back. Behind her, there was a handsome man dressed in white. If this was not Yun Bushio, who else could it be? Your Highness. Yun Bushio greeted Tangwa with a smile and slowly walked to her. Tangwa raised her eyebrows slightly. State Preceptor? What are you doing here? As your future neighbor, I'm here to visit your Highness, Yun Bushio said with a smile. I'll be living next door from now on. Please take care of me, your Highness. System, pervasive. Tangwa, shameless. State Preceptor, you're already an adult. You need to learn to take care of yourself. If you can't take care of yourself, you can spend some money and have a servant take care of you. When Yun Bushio heard that, he felt a little sad. So, your Highness still doesn't like me? This princess really holds a grudge. He had changed. He didn't approach her with bad intentions. Well, now he had a purpose. That purpose was to recommend himself to her. So much time had passed that he didn't have a chance to speak. Your Highness, in the future, if you want to go out to play, you can come find me. Under Tangwa's puzzled gaze, he quickly added, I know how to do divination. I can help your Highness divine the weather. If the weather was good, they could go out. If the weather was bad, they wouldn't go. If you have to go out and the weather is bad, with my divination, you can bring an umbrella. System. Ha ha ha, what a joke. Does this mean that I'm the weather forecast, saying that it's not a good day to go out? Please bring an umbrella? In that case, it's not bad to be neighbors with the State Preceptor. At least I don't have to be afraid of the rain when I go out. Yun Bushio quickly said, yes. Seeing that Tangwa had no intention of keeping him, he reluctantly bid farewell and said that he would go over to take a look and visit another day. 10 days later, the renovation of the house next door had been completed. Yun Bushio came again. Your Highness the First Princess, would you do me the honor of coming to my place for a meal? We will be neighbors in the future. I want to build a good relationship with the princess. After all, close neighbors are better than distant relatives. This time, Cloud Hidden Village also followed. Upon hearing Yun Bushio's words, her expression was indescribable. He really didn't know that in front of the first princess, the young master had completely lost the demeanor of an expert. He was especially like a peacock spreading its tail. Such a straightforward gaze almost expressed that he had taken a fancy to her. This time, Tangwa didn't refuse. Yun Bushio was overjoyed. He quickly and carefully invited her over. If there was a first time, there would be a second time. Yun Bushio often invited Tangwa to a meal for various reasons. Today was a housewarming celebration. Tomorrow, he would be very happy if he got a good treasure. He would also treat her to a meal. Peak. Chapter 1490. The day after tomorrow might be some unwarranted festival. He expressed that it was best to have a lively meal. He couldn't eat alone. Hearing this, Tangwa glanced at the dining table. Wasn't it just the two of them? Time passed in a flash. Yun Bushio's self-recommendation had been 5 years in the blink of an eye. System. This guy's perseverance was still as strong as before. Tangwa was impressed. Another day, Yun Bushio came to Tangwa. Before he spoke, Tangwa said, "State Preceptor, I remember that you know how to play the zither. I haven't seen you play it in these 5 years." Speaking of this, Yun Bushio didn't want to recall it. If he hadn't listened to his subordinates and used such a method to get close to her, why would he not dare to confess his feelings to her and successfully recommend himself to her? Hearing Tangwa's question, Yun Bushio's expression turned serious. He said, "Because I played the zither and angered Her Highness, I won't play the zither in the future. The zither has been destroyed. Unless Her Highness is no longer angry, I will play the zither only for Her Highness." Why was he so straightforward? Because Yun Bushio felt that this was an opportunity. For the first time in 5 years, she had asked him about himself. He didn't know why he spent so much time just to get close to her. If it was a normal person, they would have given up long ago. Yun Yu also didn't understand why his princess was so persistent. They had only met once that day. Speaking of which, this eldest princess was also an extraordinary woman. She had long passed the marriageable age, but she didn't have any plans to find a prince consort. With her noble status now, who would dare to urge her to find a prince consort? If anyone dared to force her, the people of Bei Xia would be the first to disagree. System. Host. This guy knows his mistakes and can change. It's great that he stopped the loss in time. I think it's not bad, right? Tangwa was speechless. Tongzi, you actually sympathize with him? Sigh. After all, this man is really a little pitiful. Really, what a pitiful man. Including the 5 years he lived next door, he had been chasing after her for almost 7 years. Her 7-year-age had already passed, and he didn't even hold her hand. He was really the most pitiful man in the world. State Preceptor, please help me calculate the weather. In 2 days, I will be going on a long journey. Today, Tangwa had achieved complete freedom. She could leave the imperial city at will and travel to various places. She had already told the emperor that she was going out to play. The emperor didn't want to restrain her, and there was also the crown prince helping her. Even if the empress wanted her to find a prince consort, there was nothing she could do. The 2 most powerful men in Bei Xia were on Tangwa's side. The people were also on Tangwa's side. The empress was at her wit's end. Princess, you want to go on a trip? Yun Bushio was nervous. Where are you going? Just to walk around. It's boring to stay in the princess residence all the time. I also want to go sightseeing and see the local customs. Yun Bushio was silent for a moment before saying, Your Highness, the weather is unpredictable. It can change at any time. Why don't you bring me along? I can help you calculate the weather at any time. Your Highness, don't you think this is convenient? System. Ha ha ha, it is quite convenient. It's a long journey. Is State Preceptor sure? Yun Bushio said seriously. I'm sure. All right, State Preceptor has good intentions. When we set off the day after tomorrow, let's go together. Yun Bushio was overjoyed. For this trip, Tangwa really wanted to go out for a walk. Secondly, it would be 7 years soon. Lin Yuexiang was about to bring her son and daughter to the imperial city to find Lu Qing. In these years, Lin Yuexiang had planned to come to the imperial city several times, but she was stopped by Lu Qing every time. In order to stop Lin Yuexiang, Lu Qing even secretly sent people to Lin Yuexiang's house. In the middle of the night, they opened the windows, causing the children to catch a cold. If such a vicious Lu Qing knew that Lin Yuexiang secretly came to find him, he would still kill her. Peak. Chapter 1491. Recently, Lu Qing's heart was very uneasy. This uneasiness came from his first wife, Lin Yuexiang. A few years ago, when the two children were still young, even if Lin Yuexiang wanted to come to the imperial city to find him, she would have to travel a long distance. It was impossible for her to bring the two young children with her. Later, as the children gradually grew up, Lin Yuexiang wanted to come to the imperial city to find him several times. Fortunately, he ordered people to keep watch. If Lin Yuexiang made any strange movements, he would call his subordinates to create some trouble for the other party. Every time he was able to stop Lin Yuexiang, it didn't mean that the other party would give up looking for him. Especially when the two children grew up, Lin Yuexiang's mood to look for him would be even worse. Lin Yuexiang's temper was very direct. If she knew that he had become the emperor's son-in-law, it would be strange if she didn't make a big fuss. Once this matter came out, he would really be finished. These years, Lu Qing didn't have a good time. He originally thought that Tang Shi really liked him, but later he realized that Tang Shi only liked his good-looking appearance. Ever since he worked in the fields for 3 months, his skin had become tanned and rough. Even though it slowly recovered, it couldn't be compared to before. Tang Shi was very cold towards him now. She often went to various poetry gatherings and teased the scholars in the imperial city. As a result, the two of them didn't have a child after being married for so many years. Tang Shi made him wear a green hat, and he couldn't stand it, so he hooked up with the servant girls in the princess residence. The first one was Wan Zhu. He thought that Tang Shi would be angry when she found out. He never thought that Tang Shi would say to him on the spot, "What kind of goods does the emperor's son-in-law like, other than the ones by my side? You can choose as much as you want. As for my matters, it's best that the emperor's son-in-law doesn't care." Originally, the two of them were sharp enough to cut through gold. However, the third prince wasn't successful, and Tang Shi couldn't see any hope. She also didn't want to wrong her young self because of that groundless eldest princess. She regretted it now. She didn't know why she had taken a fancy to Lu Qing. Lu Qing was already on the older side. Back then when he was in high school, he was 26 years old. Now, almost 7 years had passed, and he was already over 30 years old. How could he be compared to those young and tender scholars? After this incident, Tang Shi went even further. She simply brought her guests back to the princess mansion to play. Lu Qing sat under the candlelight and stared at the letter in his hand. It said that Lin Yuexiang had disappeared with the two children. It was very likely that she had secretly come to the imperial city. They asked him what he should do. Lu Qing sat on the chair with a gloomy face and pondered for a long time. In the end, he replied with a single word, "Kill." "Yuexiang, I'm sorry. It's your fault for not being obedient and always coming to find me. I had no choice but to do this. If you really came to the imperial city, I could only lose my head." Lu Qing put the letter in an envelope and whispered, "In the future, I won't forget your death anniversary. I will burn some paper money for you and the two children. I promise that you won't have to worry about food and clothing in the afterlife. You won't be forced by money and can be rich ghosts." Emperor's son-in-law. Hearing Wan Zhu's voice outside, Lu Qing hurriedly hid the letter. "Come in." Wan Zhu pushed open the door and carried a tray. On the tray was a bowl of soup. "Emperor's son-in-law, this servant saw that you didn't eat much and specially came to bring you some soup." Wan Zhu looked at Lu Qing affectionately. The two of them looked at each other, and the atmosphere in the study suddenly became ambiguous. Peak. Chapter 1492. Mother, can we really find father if we go to the imperial city? There were 3 people on a mountain path. The little girl who was being held by a woman asked curiously, "Mother, why isn't father coming home?" "You'll understand when we find him." Lin Yuexiang didn't smile. The news she heard from her father a few days ago made her very uneasy. Excluding the 2 years Lu Qing had lived in the imperial city and the days after the imperial examination, Lu Qing hadn't returned for nearly 10 years. During this period, she had thought of many ways to go to the imperial city to find him. However, all kinds of accidents happened before she set off. At first, she thought that these accidents were real. Until some time ago, when her father returned home from a long trip, he came to her and told her something. He said that Lu Qing was now the emperor's son-in-law. She didn't believe it, but her father said that one of their relatives knew Lu Qing and saw Lu Qing and Princess Qing getting married on a white horse. Whether she believed it or not, she had to find Lu Qing. She vaguely felt that the accident that happened before was very strange. Therefore, this time, she sneaked away with the two children through a small path in the middle of the night. Just as she thought, there were no accidents. Lin Yuexiang became suspicious. Who was stopping her from going to the imperial city? Only by finding Lu Qing would they be able to figure out all of this. Mother, don't frown. If you frown, you won't look good. LV Yufan was more sensible than LV Yuji. He also accidentally heard the conversation between his grandfather and Lin Yuexiang. Even if father doesn't want us, your son has grown up. In the future, your son will take care of you. Mother, you don't have to worry in the future. Your son will never forget you. Lin Yuexiang felt a little comforted. Holding the children in each hand, she said gently, "Let's go. No matter what, I want an explanation." She was unwilling to marry Lu Qing happily. She knew that he had a bright future ahead of him, so she took care of everything for him. She left all the delicious food at home for him. She didn't even have two children. When she heard that he was going to the imperial city a few days earlier to get used to the environment, she sold off all the money she had at home. She was afraid that he would suffer a loss. In the end, there was no news of him for almost 10 years. This time, when she went to the imperial city, she really hoped that Lu Qing had died in an accident and not married the princess. If he really died, she would raise the two children well and burn paper money for him every year on the anniversary of his death. If he really forgot about his wife and married the princess for the sake of glory and wealth, then she would definitely not let Lu Qing off. A few days later, Lin Yuexiang and the other two climbed over a mountain. He sat beside a small river and drank some water. Suddenly, she felt that something was wrong. She raised her head and saw a few people quietly walking towards her. At that time, she subconsciously held the two children's hands and ran in a certain direction. In fact, her feeling was right. When the three of them ran, those people had already flashed their knives and chased after them. Mother, LV Yuji looked at those scary people chasing after them with shining knives. She was so scared that she cried. LV Yufan's little face was very serious. Sister, don't cry. Run faster and don't let those people catch up. If you cry, you won't have the strength to run. Jier, don't be afraid. Mother will protect you. Peek. Chapter 1493. Your Highness, there doesn't seem to be any particularly beautiful scenery here. Why did you stay here for so long? Yun Buxiu was very puzzled, especially when Tanghua seemed to have ordered someone to go in another direction. It had been 2 hours, but they still hadn't returned. He was really curious about what exactly she wanted to do. If the state preceptor is impatient, you can leave? No, I'm not impatient. I'm just curious. Yun Buxiu hurriedly said, If your Highness is willing, you can stay here until the end of time. Tanghua's lips curled into a smile as she asked, State Preceptor, will it rain this afternoon? Allow me to calculate first. When it came to weather prediction, Yun Buxiu was indeed very good. His predictions were almost accurate. Even if there were any changes in between, as long as he was given another chance, he could predict the weather after the changes. In the various countries, there were not many monarchs who didn't know Yun Buxiu. Everyone hoped that Yun Buxiu could go to their country to be the state preceptor. Who would have known that Yun Buxiu, who seemed to be an otherworldly expert in their eyes, had been reduced to being a weather forecaster, and the kind that he was willing to do. Your Highness, there will be heavy rain near evening, and it will rain all night. After saying that, he glanced at the people who were building the shed over there and looked curiously at Tanghua. Could it be that she knew that there would be heavy rain in the evening, so she asked people to build the shed? This was the wilderness, and it was full of messy trees and weeds. It wasn't a beautiful place to look at, especially when there was a sloping hillside where they were facing. Half the afternoon, The shed to shelter them from the rain had been built. Tangwa's fleet of carriages also moved in, and the attendants started to cook. This time, Yunbushio didn't say much, afraid that he would anger her and be despised by her. He had a feeling that even if he knew how to calculate the weather, it was not essential to her. That day, he had already expressed his feelings, but she didn't seem to care. He couldn't figure out what she was thinking, but he vaguely understood that it was because of their first meeting that he missed the most important thing. In this lifetime, if there were no accidents, the best outcome would be for him to stay by her side. In the worst-case scenario, he wouldn't even have a chance to stay by her side. State Preceptor, why are you staring at me? I'm thinking of how to appease His Highness' anger. Yunbushio looked very innocent. The followers around him were already used to it. Along the way, the State Preceptor was really shameless. Tangwa ate her snacks and said, I'm not angry with you. That's because you don't like me. If I didn't like you, I wouldn't have brought the Imperial Tutor along. Then, Yunbushio didn't ask because she looked up at him with a faint smile. State Preceptor, why did you attract my attention back then? Yunbushio answered honestly, it was to gain His Highness' trust. I wanted His Highness to help me ask for a precious medicinal herb from the Empress. So, you used your beauty to bewitch me and deceive my feelings. When the time comes, you'll take the herb, say that we're not suitable for each other, and then leave. Yunbushio was silent. This was the decision from the beginning. Is that right?
Yes.
Yunbushio stole a glance at her expression. Seeing that she was still smiling, as if she wasn't angry, he felt even more uneasy. The peak. Chapter 1494. What about now? What's your motive for getting close to me and pleasing me? Yunbushio said sincerely, I hope that one day, I can be treated properly by your highness, or even spend the rest of my life with your highness. I don't want to get married in this lifetime. We have known each other for so many years. State Preceptor, you should know. It's all right. As long as I can be your highness's neighbor, Bushio is willing. Tangwa was amused and said, you are content. State Preceptor is a person who likes to be idle. Are you really willing to stay in the imperial city and bind yourself to a big house for the rest of your life? I am willing. I am willing to be your highness weather forecast for the rest of my life. System. Ha ha ha. Yunbushio, you are awesome. All right, whatever you want to do, I will not interfere or force you. This is your personal choice. Hearing that Tangwa would not chase him away, Yunbushio heaved a sigh of relief. Your Highness, I have a question. Speak. If Bushio did not have any other motives when we met for the first time, would it be possible for us to become husband and wife? Tangwa laughed softly. I don't know either. But what I want to say is that the first sight is really important. The first sight of you is that you are not qualified. I am the eldest princess of Baisia. Now that Imperial Father has allowed me to marry, there is no need for me to get married for the sake of getting married. What I want to do now is to travel around and cultivate more new varieties of crops. Then Bushio's wish is to be able to stay by your highness side and be your highness weather forecast. I hope your highness will not mind. Even if they could not become husband and wife, they could spend the rest of their lives together, right? He could tell that the princess really did not want to get married. Her words and eyes carried a kind of leisurely attitude. She was very different from the women of this dynasty. This was a woman who cared about the world and her soul was free. When it came to matters of the heart, she might just want it one day. After the two of them talked in the afternoon, Yunbushio was much more at ease. He was seriously reporting the weather for Tangwa. The attendants and maids were speechless. When it was close to night, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the sky, followed by a heavy rain that seemed to never stop. Yunbushio still didn't understand why Tangwa was sitting in the shed and looking at the slope not far away. He also stared at it. After about an hour, 2 lumps of something rolled down from the hillside. Before he could react, he heard Tangwa say, Hurry up and save those 2 children. 2 children? Yunbushio's eyes darkened. Although he was not far away, the sky was very dark. In addition to the heavy rain, he did not see clearly. The 2 children rolled down from the opposite side. He thought they were stones. Even though LV Yufan had concealed her surprise and made her eyes and face look confused, she couldn't hide it from her. You look like you're alive and kicking. Looks like you're not in any danger, Tangwa said with a smile. LV Yufan was dumbfounded. Wasn't this the eldest princess? Why was she here? Shouldn't she be in the residence of the princess in the imperial city now? What was going on? No. LV Yufan lowered her head and looked at her small hands. Her pupils dilated. He turned his head and saw the little girl sleeping beside her. Her eyes were filled with pain and confusion. Little sister? Why was his little sister so small? What was going on? Tangwa looked at LV Yufan's stunned and disbelieving face. She turned to Ingzhu and said, "Stay outside and don't let anyone in." "Yes, Your Highness." Peek. Chapter 1496. You know me, right? In this small cubicle, only Tangwa and LV Yufan were left. LV Yuji was still unconscious, which meant that there were only the two of them. LV Yufan was still surprised that he had returned to his childhood. How could he return to this time? It was too late. When he suddenly heard Tangwa's words, he subconsciously raised his head. Wait, no, it's different. The fact that the first princess was here and had saved him meant that everything was different now. This was a barren mountain with no roads. There was no such thing as the other party accidentally saving him. Moreover, it started to rain heavily last night. From his current condition, it could be seen that he was saved when he rolled down the hill. He remembered that in his previous life, he was drenched in the rain for a whole night. He and his sister rolled to the side of the road. In the end, he was saved by a beggar and was unconscious for several days. He didn't want to be a beggar and wanted to take revenge. Therefore, he joined a rich family as a page boy. Now, everything was different. This difference was most likely caused by this eldest princess. Your Highness the first princess? LV Yufan was a smart person. He was no longer a child. And Tangwa smiled and looked at him. When he was about to guess something, she said, "Little top scorer LV, I'm very happy that you're back." What? LV Yufan's eyes widened. Was she going to lay her cards on the table? He hadn't thought of what to say. System. The host is teasing me again. All right, as someone who had been scammed by Lu Qing before, if I were to reveal my identity, Lu Yufan would have no choice but to work for me. Your Highness the first princess, did you come here especially for me? LV Yufan accepted the fact that both of them were reborn. In my previous life, I was deceived by LV Qing and caused Your Highness to be in trouble. Now, Your Highness came to save me and became LV Yufan's savior. I wonder what Your Highness's purpose is? If Your Highness wants to take my life personally, please give me time to take revenge. After I kill LV Qing, I will ask for Your Highness's forgiveness. If I wanted your life, I would have asked someone to stab you when I saw you yesterday evening. In your previous life, you and I were both deceived by a scoundrel. We are in the same boat. I saved you so that you could deal with LV Qing. Now, I just pinched him lightly and he died. It's very satisfying. The corners of Tangwa's lips curled up slightly. Her beautiful eyes fell on Lu Qing. If you kill him with your own hands, I'll feel better. LV Yufan's small body was trembling. Was this still the kind-hearted and pure first princess? And you did wrong, you. After you killed LV Qing, you'll be loyal to my brother for the rest of your life. How's it? All right, as long as Your Highness gives me a chance to take revenge, I, LV Yufan, will devote my entire life to the Northern Xia Kingdom and be loyal to the Crown Prince forever. If the Crown Prince didn't fall, then the third prince wouldn't have a chance. Back then, he had only been deceived. Those two people were too powerful, and he had helped them make a wedding dress. Now that he had the chance to do it all over again, let's see if he didn't kill those two. Neither of them should even think about escaping. System. Another bull that was willing to sell his life. Your Highness, I have a request. I hope you can send someone to look for my mother. LV Yufan's eyes were red and tears almost came out. He was not a child anymore. How could he cry in front of a girl? That would be too embarrassing. What's there to look for? Your mother is seriously injured and is still recuperating next door. If you want to see her, You can go now. LV Yufan. How did this woman get reborn? She's so powerful. People really can't be compared. He was reborn, but he was still a piece of fish. Now that she was reborn, it was a reversal of fate. System. This kid is stupid. Peak. Chapter 1497. After praising Tangwa's prowess, LV Yufan didn't care that her head was still a little dizzy. She hurriedly got off the bed and went next door to check on Lin Yuexiang's condition. WWW-250 Saiyun Bushio had been waiting outside the whole time. When he saw the thin and pale LV Yufan following behind Tangwa, he said, "Your body hasn't recovered yet. You should lie down and rest for 2 days." LV Yufan didn't recognize Yun Bushio, but at first glance, she knew that he wasn't a simple person. He remembered that Tangwa had been reborn like him. Presumably, the other party had changed many things. It wasn't strange for this seemingly simple man to appear by her side. This is State Preceptor Yun Bushio. Not only is he good at divination, but his medical skills are also good. He was the one who treated your illness yesterday. Your mother was almost dead, but he was the one who saved her, Tangwa explained to LV Yufan. Hearing this, LV Yufan hurriedly cupped her hands and bowed to Yun Bushio. Her face was full of gratitude. LV Yufan thanks State Preceptor for saving my life. No need to thank me. You should thank His Highness. Without His Highness's orders, I wouldn't have meddled in other people's business. Yun Bushio looked aloof and indifferent. Even Ingzhu couldn't help but laugh. The State Preceptor was really a two-faced person. He tried to curry favor with His Highness, but in front of other people, he acted like an expert. Ingzhu admired the speed at which he changed his face. Perhaps in one moment, he was asking about His Highness's well-being, but in the next moment, he was indifferent and unapproachable in front of these people. It could be seen that the State Preceptor really cared about His Highness. Unfortunately, he shouldn't have schemed against His Highness the first time they met. No matter how good he was now, if His Highness didn't want to do something, she, as a personal palace maid, wouldn't interfere with His Highness's choice. She only needed to serve His Highness well. LV Yufan was an intelligent person. She immediately understood what was going on. Yun Bushio looked at him with a cold expression, but when he said, "Your Highness," his tone and eyes instantly became gentle. He sighed again. She was indeed the favored princess. Her rebirth was like reaching the heavens in a single bound. Of course, he wasn't jealous. He just felt that fate was playing with people. Now that he was back, his mother wasn't dead, and his sister wasn't reduced to a prostitute. On the contrary, he was very glad that the first princess could be reborn. Otherwise, even if he was reborn at this time, he would not be able to do anything. With his young age, what could he possibly do? His mother couldn't be saved, and his sister's whereabouts were also unknown. Therefore, he should really thank the first princess. LV Yufan secretly swore in his heart that he would be loyal to Her Royal Highness the Princess for the rest of his life. He would also erase the mistakes he made in his previous life when he was bewitched by a scoundrel. Tangwa felt the change in LV Yufan's eyes, but she didn't care. There was only one reason why she saved Lu Qing's family. She didn't want Lu Qing to lead a comfortable life. It wasn't because of righteousness, but because of her own selfish motives. System. But the host, invisibly, will always harvest some cows that are willing to help her plow the fields. After LV Yufan saw Lin Yuexiang, he really felt relieved. Although his mother's injuries were very serious, her life was saved. After 2 months of recuperation, she could still recover. It's fine as long as she's alive. Soon after, LV Yufan, with tears in his eyes, once again bowed 3 times to Tangwa. "Your Highness, what do I need to do next?" His life was saved by her, so everything from now on should be arranged by her. He was perfectly willing. The apex. Chapter 1498. Study hard, Tangwa said. Strive to be the top scorer as soon as possible. Okay. LV Yufan's eyes lit up. In his previous life, he relied on the books left behind by Lu Qing and the books that his grandfather found for him. In addition, with the appreciation of that rich young master, he also became the top scorer at a young age. Now that he had a second life, these were all familiar to him. After knowing the next path, LV Yufan listened to Yun Bushio's words and went back to lie down and rest. Even if he wanted to take revenge, he had to do it step by step. The most important thing was to take care of his body. Your Majesty, who is he? Yun Bushio saw that Tangwa did not avoid him, so he asked. Tangwa replied, this child is called LV Yufan, the little girl inside is called LV Yuji, and the heavily injured woman is called Lin Yuesheng. They are Lu Qing's wife and son. Yun Bushio was slightly stunned, and his expression was also a little surprised. Which Lu Qing? State Preceptor. Do you think there is another Lu Qing? So, he hid the fact that he has a wife and son and became the prince consort? Yun Bushio indeed did not guess this, because Lu Qing was the top scorer. To be able to stand out among so many scholars, it could be seen that his ability was not small. In Baixia country, if one became the prince consort, he would not be able to enter the imperial court as an official. An ambitious man would definitely not give up the opportunity to be promoted and become a prince consort with no real power. This Lu Qing was really different from other people, and the path he chose was also different. Then what happened yesterday? Yun Bushio had already thought of why the three mother and son were in such a sorry state. The three of them planned to enter the imperial city to look for Lu Qing. Do you think Lu Qing would be willing to let them look for him? Once this matter was exposed, even 10 heads would not be enough for him to lose. Yun Bushio said, that person is really vicious. The most vicious is yet to come. Imperial Preceptor, just watch. Whatever happens next may overturn your outlook on life. Tangwa said with a smile. Yun Bushio was only a little curious about what happened next. What he was most curious about was that the princess seemed to be in control of everything, as if there was nothing in the world that she did not know. Even the matter of that Lu Qing wanting to enter the crop field and steal seeds, this one is also very clear. In the end, he worked himself to death for 3 months in vain. The stolen seeds had long since been disseminated among the common people. It was said that Lu Qing's complexion was very bad at that time, and he even fell ill. Previously, he had divined the fate of the northern summer country. The northern summer country's fate, which was supposed to be declining, was actually gradually flourishing. As for how much they could prosper, no matter how capable he was, he couldn't see that far. Vaguely, he had a feeling that as long as the princess of the northern summer country was alive, the northern summer country would not decline. 7 years' time was neither long nor short, but she had brought about earth-shaking changes to the northern summer country. And she was not greedy for power. No wonder the whole country, and even the emperor, was willing to give her a special honor. As for the crown prince, he was a siscon. When the crown prince was around, he could forget about talking to the princess. Originally, the crown prince was still respectful to him, but because of him, the crown prince had moved next to the princess residence. Every time the crown prince saw him, he would speak to him in a strange tone, as if he owed him 5 million taels of silver. Your Highness, do you want to return directly to the imperial city in a few days? Yun Bushio thought that there were 3 more people now, so he asked. The peak. Chapter 1499. We've only been out for less than a month. Why are we going back? Of course, we're going to continue playing. What about the 3 of them? Bring them along. Tangwa's gaze landed on Yun Bushio's face. State Preceptor is knowledgeable and talented. That LV Yufan is a good seedling. I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on him along the way and give him pointers if you can. And that LV Yuji is a girl. I think she can learn medicine. Is State Preceptor willing? System. Make use of everything you can. I'm willing. Of course, Yun Bushio would not refuse. He had many doubts in his heart. It could be seen that she did not intend to tell him. He did not ask anymore. Whatever she wanted to do, he would help her. As long as she was satisfied and happy, it was fine. LV Yuji was the second to wake up. When she woke up, she looked dazed. Tangwa looked at her and knew that she was a real child. There was no rebirth. LV Yufan comforted her for a long time. She even said that Lin Yuexiang was fine. Only then did the little girl's eyes recover. Brother, where are those bad people? Why did they chase after us and almost kill Mother? Dang! Lin Yuexiang knew that if they continued to run, the three of them would die. When they passed by a slope, she ruthlessly pushed the two children down. Whether or not he could survive was up to fate. If they fell into the hands of those people, they would not have any chance of survival. At that time, it was raining heavily and the sky was gradually darkening. Those people might not have seen her actions, but her running figure would easily attract their attention. She did succeed. Those people did not notice the two children rolling down the slope. Those bad people have been caught. Seeing that LV Yufan did not know what to say, Tangwa straightforwardly said, as for why they want to kill you, it's because they were ordered to eliminate the roots to prevent future trouble. LV Yufan stared blankly at Tangwa. It was already too late to stop her. Who sent them? LV Yuji asked. Her beautiful big eyes looked at Tangwa. Pretty sister, can you tell me who wants to kill me, my brother, and my mother? Your father. LV Yufan was speechless. If the little girl knew about this, she was afraid that she would be traumatized. Tangwa glanced at him and said, I think what happened to you before is enough to leave a terrible impression on your sister. Why don't you tell her everything? Let her accept it as soon as possible. She will face it sooner or later anyway. Daddy, why do you want to kill us? Sure enough, when LV Yuji heard this, tears uncontrollably flowed out. Because your father hid the fact that he had a wife and a child to become the princess's son-in-law for the sake of glory and wealth. LV Yufan no longer tried to stop him. You're right. You'll have to face it sooner or later. Lu Qing wasn't a good person. If he gave his sister the impression that Lu Qing was a good person, it would hinder his revenge in the future. They had just been hunted down. At this time, knowing that Lu Qing was the one behind all this, his sister should not have any hope for Lu Qing anymore. After Tangwa finished speaking, she left with a smile on her face. She left the crying LV Yuji to LV Yufan to comfort. Her expression made LV Yufan think that she was deliberately looking for trouble for him. System. Little scholar LV is really smart. Host did it on purpose. A few days later, Lin Yuexiang also woke up. Tangwa repeated what Lu Qing did in front of Lin Yuexiang. Peak. Chapter 1500. LV Yufan felt as if there was nothing left to live for. He already understood that this was the princess taking revenge for a personal grudge. Lin Yuexiang had already expected that Lu Qing would have a change of heart. It wasn't difficult for her to accept the matter regarding the princess. When she heard that the person who wanted to kill her was also Lu Qing, she said in a daze, I, Lin Yuexiang, have never done anything to let him down. Everything I did was for his future. I gave birth to children for him and never let him spend any effort. In the end, he was afraid of losing his head and actually wanted my life. Lin Yuexiang didn't cry, but her face was very numb. LV Yuji pursed her lips and held her hand as if she wanted to cry. LV Yufan also looked at her anxiously and comforted her softly. Lin Yuexiang regained her senses and looked at her two obedient children. She said in a low voice, Your father abandoned the three of us for glory and wealth. Now, because he's afraid of death, he wants our lives. Yufan, Yuji, Mother can't take this lying down. I still want to go to the imperial city. Even if I have to sue until the end of time, I will drag Lu Qing down from his high position. Mother, why don't we listen to what the eldest princess has to say? Our lives were saved by this one. Lin Yuexiang reacted and quickly thanked Tangwa. She said, I don't dare to ask for justice for this commoner. I only ask that this commoner has a chance to do so. After I sue Lu Qing, this commoner is willing to serve you. Host, you're a straightforward person with upright values. You actually didn't ask for help to take revenge for her. The system was a little surprised. It thought that Lin Yuexiang would directly ask the host to help her. Her character was similar to LV Yufan's. They both wanted to have a chance to take revenge. They didn't want the host to help. A woman who can give up herself at a critical moment and push two children down the mountain is very rare in this era. Lin Yuexiang has a straightforward character. I have already expected this. I didn't come all the way here to save them in vain. If they could not be helped, she would rather watch them walk towards their original fate. I don't need you to serve me. Lin Yuexiang hesitated for a moment, then asked, What requests do your majesty have? This humble woman will do her best to fulfill them. Even though she knew that the high and mighty princess didn't care at all, she still said those words with sincerity. The reason why I'm helping you is because Lu Qing provoked me. Lin Yuexiang had heard of this princess's name before and had always admired her. This was the role model for all the women in the northern summer country. Did you know that the person Lu Qing wanted to scheme against was me? It's just that I was lucky enough to avoid it. Lin Yuexiang's expression was indescribable. It was her parents' orders and the matchmaker's words. Chapter 1501. Lin Yuexiang didn't understand why the noble princess would spend so much effort to change her. Along the way, they traveled, recited poems, and painted. They also ordered people to take care of her body and even take care of her skin, which had slowly begun to age. As for her son and daughter, they both became Yun Bushio's in-name disciples. Her son learned divination and the knowledge of the world, while her daughter learned medicine from Yun Bushio. Of course, she had the most important task. She had to take care of her body, skin, and learn the four arts. It was 100 times harder than plowing the fields and sowing seeds. She was already in her 30s, and her brain couldn't keep up with young people, but she didn't refuse to learn these things. She always knew that Lu Qing was a talented person. She could more or less feel that he looked down on her. If she had time, she would also like to learn some calligraphy and painting to cultivate her body. But she had to take care of her family and Lu Qing. How could she have time to discuss poetry and painting with him? She didn't expect that after surviving a disaster, she would have such an opportunity to change. She vaguely understood the princess's thoughts. Could it be that she wanted the changed her to appear in front of Lu Qing and surprise him? Perhaps this was the noble princess's interest. Moreover, her son encouraged her. Every day, the two little ones praised her for becoming prettier. When she communicated with her son, there seemed to be more topics to talk about. She became more interested. She could also tell the stories in the ancient books to her son and daughter. Lin Yuexiang felt that she really wasted a lot of time, so she worked even harder to learn. Tanghua was very happy to see the three mother and son so active. Yun Bushio was still puzzled. Why was she so happy when the three of them changed so much? If I'm not satisfied with Lu Qing, I have many reasons to make him lose his head. Just the fact that the other party colluded with the third prince and secretly wanted to rebel was enough to make Lu Qing suffer. Tanghua withdrew her gaze from Lin Yuexiang, who was playing the piano. She narrowed her eyes and said, Life is too long. We have to find something more interesting. Lu Qing is too disgusting. I don't think it's enough to just kill him. Then, in your opinion, what should we do to vent our anger? Slowly, step by step, let him lose what he has. Tanghua tilted her head and said with a smile, Second royal sister returned to the princess mansion with a gigolo in front of him. Don't you think he feels bad? Of course it's uncomfortable. That vulgar woman whom he once looked down on suddenly turned into a talented woman with exceptional looks. He actually failed to recognize her and chased after her for several days, but to no avail. He only found out about the other party's identity at the very last moment. Don't you think he was upset? Yun Bushio's lips twitched. LV Yufan, who was sitting opposite him and watching the game of chess, almost flipped the whole chessboard. This princess was really eccentric after her rebirth. She did whatever she wanted. Sigh, it was Lu Qing's fault. He cheated her feelings and in the end, he even turned the tables on her. Not only that, he even killed her biological brother and caused the death of her empress mother. In the end, he joined forces with the third prince to destroy her imperial father. How could she not hate such a person? This was simply a deep-seated hatred. He also felt that just killing Lu Qing was not enough to vent his hatred. It was a brilliant plan. Yun Bushio was a little stunned. The peak. Chapter 1502. It turned out that taking revenge on someone could be so deliberate that the other party would die with grievances. At that time, Yun Bushio was thinking that if she used all her heart to love someone, wouldn't that person be very happy? State Preceptor? Tangwa called out when she saw Yun Bushio's stunned expression. Yun Bushio was still lost in his own thoughts, as if he didn't hear her. State Preceptor, what are you thinking about? Why are you so engrossed? Perhaps it was because Yun Bushio was used to answering her honestly, so he subconsciously said, I was thinking, if your highness were to deliberately treat someone well and love them well, how happy would that person be? LV Yufan. Is it really okay for the state preceptor to do this? At least on the surface, he still looked like a child. Before Tangwa could reply, Yun Bushio realized that he couldn't take back his words. He met her smiling gaze and hurriedly said, Your Highness, please don't misunderstand. Bushio is already very satisfied to be able to follow your Highness and be your Highness' neighbor. State Preceptor, do you think I don't treat you well? Yun Bushio didn't even think before replying, Your Highness treats me very well. It's good that State Preceptor understands. Look, other than my personal palace maid, Ingzhu, and those attendants, where would I go with others? State Preceptor invites me to a meal every time. Didn't I go to your residence? If there's anything new, I didn't instruct anyone to call you. System, Facepalm, the host is getting even. Tangwa looked at LV Yufan with a greedy expression. LV Yufan was speechless. Tangwa looked at LV Yufan. Then he thought of his previous life. Could it be that the princess was traumatized by Lu Qing and didn't intend to love anyone in this life? LV Yufan looked at Yun Bushio with sympathy. Yun Bushio, Your Highness is indeed very good to Bushio. State Preceptor is really forgetful. I'm so good to you, but you still want me to love you. You're too greedy. No, Bushio is really satisfied. I won't let my imagination run wild anymore. For some reason, Yun Bushio felt his hair stand on end when he heard her say that he was greedy. System, that's a restriction. This guy is really something. Each restriction is more powerful than the last. In just 1 year, Lin Yuexiang had undergone earth-shattering changes. Even if she wore a plain dress, it was difficult to conceal her temperament. Now, anyone who saw her would not associate her with the vulgar village woman who raised children at home and farmed vegetables. Her skin became snow-white, and she could even speak eloquently. LV Yufan was much more knowledgeable than in her previous life. As for LV Yuji, she was already able to diagnose patients on her own. Along the way, many of the volunteer medical consultations were done by her. She even obtained the title of Little Divine Doctor. During this period, Tangwa also arranged for the three of them to practice martial arts. Lin Yuexiang originally thought that practicing martial arts was a waste of time, so it was better to practice calligraphy and read books. Then, Tangwa gave her a reason that she could not refuse, so she happily went to practice martial arts. This reason was, when you see Lu Qing in the future, you have a unique skill. You can send him flying with 2 slaps. Does that feel good? Lin Yuexiang was stunned at that time. When she came back to her senses, her eyes lit up and she only said, Yes. Her Highness the eldest princess was indeed the woman she admired the most. This reason for practicing martial arts was very good. She had long wanted to beat Lu Qing. She must beat his little white face into a pig's head. Thus, among the three of them, Lin Yuexiang was the one who practiced martial arts the most seriously. Your Highness, you really are omnipotent. You actually asked people to carve Lu Qing's name on the wooden stakes. Now that my mother is practicing martial arts with all her might every day, many of the wooden stakes have already been broken. LV Yufan said helplessly. Tangwa was all smiles as she said, That Lu Qing is very shameless. Isn't it because I want Yuexiang to learn more skills so that she won't be at a disadvantage when dealing with Lu Qing in the future? System. The host's reasons have always been sufficient. Look at Lin Yuexiang's energetic appearance. Chapter 1503. Tangwa traveled outside for 3 years. In these 3 years, she brought Lin Yuexiang and her son to see the world, which broadened their horizons. LV Yufan died early in his previous life. He was almost 16 years old when he became the top scholar. When he died, he was 17 years old. He was not even 18 years old when he was killed by Lu Qing. Half of his life was spent in the village. He leaned against the wall made of mud and carefully flipped through the books that were already worn out. The remaining half of his time was spent thinking about how to take revenge, even though he read a lot of books in order to pass the imperial examinations. Most of the books he read were for the sake of passing the imperial examinations. At such a young age, he did not really understand the world. It turned out that it was so magnificent. If it wasn't his previous life, when he was older, more experienced and more knowledgeable, he would not have believed that the eldest princess was the one who did those things just because of Lu Qing's words. He would not have been used by Lu Qing to create a tragedy for all of them. 3 years had passed, and the three of them had changed a lot. LV Yufan was becoming more and more mature, and LV Yuji had also changed her habit of crying at every turn. Her innate talent was not bad, and she had even learned the ability to bring people back to life from Yunbushio. She was truly worthy of the title of Little Divine Doctor. Along the way, LV Yuji was the one who treated those who were seriously ill. As for Lin Yuexiang, not only did she diligently study poetry, calligraphy, and various kinds of needlework, but she was also obsessed with beauty and martial arts. Wherever she went, she would be praised as a pretty lady who knew martial arts. As for Tanghua, she was basically inspecting the environment, temperature, soil, and recording everything. When she returned, she would start to cultivate crops that did not grow in the environment. They had also been to other small countries and brought back many crops that did not exist in Baixia country. During this period, LV Yufan went to participate in various examinations. He also practiced martial arts, and with his good physical strength, even if it was a long journey, it did not affect him at all. Seeing that there were still a few months before the next imperial examination, Tanghua was prepared to end this trip and bring LV Yufan back to participate in the imperial examination. The three of them had changed greatly. Even if they were in front of Lu Qing, he might not believe that they were his wife and children. Lin Yuexiang, in particular, had the demeanor of a master. In the later years, she also learned from Tanghua how to cultivate all kinds of seeds. She already knew how to do this, so it was even easier for her to learn. When Tanghua asked her if she wanted to find another conscience after the matter with Lu Qing was settled, Gu Chengel didn't say anything. Lin Yuexiang smiled faintly and said, "Your Highness, may I ask, why aren't you getting married?" "I don't want to get married. It's good to be free like this," Tanghua said without thinking. Lin Yuexiang noticed that Yun Bushio, who was not far away, had a disappointed look on her face. She couldn't help but smile and said, "Yuexiang also thinks that it's good to be free. In this era, when a woman gets married, there will be many restrictions. The woman that Yuexiang admires the most is Your Highness. Your Highness can be called a role model for women. You let Yuexiang understand that even if a woman doesn't get married, she will still live a good life. I'm also very grateful that Your Highness has set such a role model for all the women in the world. With Your Highness around, women will not be mocked if they don't get married. So, you are not willing, right?"